Call the TAB meeting to order. It is April 20th, 2022, 12:33 p.m. And let's use our usual practice of approving the agenda and doing roll call in a single effort by Ms. Ernst. So we could handle that. And Doug Anderson, if he's with us, ably leads off the way. So let's go ahead and start that. Ms. Ernst?
Anderson.
Present, and I.
Bailey.
Mayor?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, there we can hear.
There we go. I, sorry.
No, you're
Thanks,
fine.
Mayor.
Barber.
Present and I.
Barnes.
Present and I.
Crimmins.
Present and I.
Dugan.
Present and I.
Foster.
Present, I.
Geisler.
Present I.
Gattell.
Here, I.
Giuliani Stevens.
Here, I.
Hanson.
Present I.
Holberg.
Here, yes.
Holland said. Or Stephanie Alexander. Jalali.
Sorry,
Jepson.
this is Stephanie Alexander here and I.
Thank you. Jalali.
Here and I.
Jepson.
Here and I.
Kowalski.
Present. I.
Keeley.
Here and I.
Payne in for Koski.
Present and I.
Lewis.
Present, and I.
Watson in for Lindeke.
Here and I.
Look.
Present, I.
Maluchnik.
Present I.
Martinson.
Here, I.
Metis Castillo.
Here and I.
Ewan.
Here and I.
Johnson in for Naryanan.
Present, I.
Petrick. Schember.
Present, and I.
Stephenson.
Present, and I.
Ulrich.
Here and I.
Williams.
Janet?
Present and I.
Windshuttle.
I and I.
And Workman.
Tom?
Mr. Chair, I've just joined Matt Holland.
All right, thanks. Member Hollinshead.
Thank you.
All right, good. Well, thanks. Thanks for that roll. And we've got an agenda approved. So we're going to go right to reports. I'm going to hold mine till after Deb Barber gives her report out for the council. So I'll go right to Mike Barnes at MnDOT.
All right. Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a couple items. We're still getting the little bursts of snow. We've started the construction season, and so there's been up on the website now from our department. If you want to see the statewide list of projects of the few hundred, it's up there just from the projects on this year. We got a carryover of some bigger ones yet. We're still working on the 3rd Avenue Bridge and the 35W stormwater storage, and also the 94 35E concrete work down in the St. Paul area. Just a couple of the kind of carryover bigger ones. But when we look at the map, I don't think we've not hit pretty much any of the corridors. So you guys will all be mad for MnDOT throughout this year again. Thanks we have some funding to be able to work on some of these projects. But a few of them that are standing out. We got the Highway 10 that's already reduced to 1 lane up here in the Anoka area. 13 down in the Savage area will get some work, and 55 will have pavement work, as well as 77 down in Bloomington. Just a few of those that some folks are on here will see. And then there's a lot of other projects that are scattered throughout the area. So I guess the key part, if you want to know more, we have the list on the website. You can click on a link and then find out a little bit more about the projects and the duration, kind of the time frames. And then the key part again is to continue to use the 511 when you're going to be doing any of the traveling side of it. So, and then just a quick item, because I've been trying to highlight each time, and it's good we're going to be talking about safety, kind of the system approach here this afternoon. But I'm just, as of now, or as of this last week, there were 80 traffic deaths across Minnesota, which is less than, it's about 18% less than this same time last year, but still higher than 2020. So things were starting to come down, but definitely not where we were before. And as we've talked about, and I think everybody's seen when you're out on the road, that the speed is one of the bigger factors yet, even though that's still going down. And so then still another reminder too that the Metro TZD workshop that I sent some information out is going to be next week up at the Earl Brown Center. So with that, that's just a few of the highlights I was going to do, Mr. Chair, unless there's some questions.
We'll check on questions from our colleagues. Any questions for Member Barnes with respect to the MnDOT report? Thanks, Member Barnes. And then over to Todd Bewan at MPCA. Member Bewan, anything to report out on?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the lines of the pre-meeting chit chat, we had a couple things. We continue to move through on the Volkswagen settlement grants, so there's money available, and the upcoming grants are around heavy-duty off-road vehicles and equipment. So this could be construction equipment that is stationary, or it could be mobile equipment. And we want to replace old diesel heavy-duty equipment and off-road with new diesel or electric models. We also want to replace, this equipment with cleaner electric models. So, and then the other category of things is electric vehicle charging. And these are, in pursuit of trying to install electric vehicle charging in public locations, workplaces, and multi-unit dwellings. There is money available for those categories. More information on those things can be found on our website, and I can put that link in the chat. The other thing is that we continue to have kind of an open period on the climate action framework, and that period closes on April 29th. And that document can be found at min.gov/framework. Again, that's the state's climate action framework. So that is all I have for my report.
That prompt any questions from anybody or comments from any?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Member Holland's head.
Any schedule on putting Electrify America charging stations on 35 up to Duluth, or 94 up to up to Northwest Minnesota?
I can't answer that, but I can try to find that information. Does anyone else know? So again, Member Holland said it was 35.
35 to Duluth.
Yeah.
And 94 up to Northwest Minnesota, because if you look at the Electrify VW map, there's no charging stations beyond the Twin Cities yet. And it's been that way for, I don't know, a couple of years at least. So I'm just wondering whether we'll get those stations into Minnesota further than we have them soon.
Okay. Fair question.
All right.
I'll see what I can find out.
Mr. Chair, another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's off-road and heavy duty, or is it off-road heavy duty or off-road and heavy duty diesel that you're looking to target?
It is off-road vehicles.
Okay.
That would be getting new diesel or electric models, and heavy-duty equipment.
So would heavy-duty equipment be like, old fire trucks, old plows, or really kind of looking at the off-road side of the construction side or construction industry?
It looks like it also includes vehicles, so I think those categories would fall into that. So there's heavy duty construction equipment, but then there's also just heavy duty vehicles. So I think that, to me, that could be broader.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification.
All right, thanks for the question, Mr. Morast. Any other questions for Member Buin? All right, let's move on to Carl Crimmins at the MAC. Member Crimmins?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A few things. In March, because of spring break, the activity at the airport has picked up. We were averaging 31,000 people through security in the month of March. And then we have daily operations in April right now are 13% over 2021 level. And parking in 2020, April 2020, we had 1,000 cars in the parking lot. In April of 2022, we had 17,028 cars in the parking lot. So as you can see, there's a large uptick. The next thing I wanted to talk about was European service is at 80% of 2019 levels. The Asian market is the one that's still lagging behind quite severely. But international travel is picking up. And happy to say the staff at MAC was quite elated that the FAA has approved our noise mitigation plan for the next 8 years. And as you know, Minnesota MSP MAC has one of the most aggressive noise mitigation plans in North America. We do more for homes that are affected by airplane noise than any other airport in America, in North America. So it was quite exciting that staff worked on that for a long time, and I'm sure they're very happy to get that behind them. And the thing I believe is on everybody's mind is the mask mandate. And on April 18th at 8 p.m., TSA issued a directive they will not enforce mask mandates after that federal judge's ruling. And the Airport Council International has requested that the CDC lift pre-departure testing requirement for international travel. So what that refers to is the TSA will not enforce mask-related security directives. They're also withdrawing the security directive for airports, the directive for aircraft operators and surface transportation operators. And they are urging the CDC to lift an emergency amendment to foreign air carriers. But it's important everybody understands TSA's withdrawal does not preclude a transportation operator from imposing its own face mask requirements. I don't know how that's going to play out. I'm sure the market and everything else will have a lot to do with that. And then I saw Bridget Reef is on the call or on the computer, and we did receive an award from the Concrete Institute. And if Bridget, if you're there, if you want to jump in and talk about that award for the concrete work that was done at the airport recently.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. The Minnesota Department of Transportation. So thank you to our MnDOT partners and our federal partners with the FAA. We're very supportive with grant monies as it related to our inbound and outbound roadway at MSP. And so we've been recognized for the excellence in construction for those two projects. And just want to acknowledge the opportunity that came about from COVID, if there were any, relates to that project because we were able to reconstruct the roads in full concrete with lane closures. And the time it takes to do that, we would not have been able to do under normal traffic conditions. So there was good that came out of COVID.
All right, thanks, Ms. Reef.
And that would end my report, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Member Crimmins. Any questions for Member Crimmins?
Yeah,
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
Member Foster.
Thank
and
you.
then Member Hollinshead. Member Foster, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, Mr. Crimmins. So I appreciate the stats on the parking increase. Do you have stats on transit trips out to the airport too for the same time period?
No, ma'am, I don't have that. We could probably get that from MnDOT or somebody, but we don't. I don't see any numbers on that. I couldn't help with that. I'm sorry. I could get it for you though.
Yeah, I'm interested in that just to know first if they're tracked and then what they actually are. So I look forward to that. Thank you.
Yeah, excuse me, but Mr. Chair, but it's hard to tell when somebody gets on light rail where they're getting off. So, you know, if traffic picks up in Minneapolis, you don't know if they're going to the Mall of America or they're going to the airport, you know, so it's hard. It'd be hard to tell, well, like I say, where they're exiting the train.
But Member Barber may have some insight here on that.
I do. At least I can point you to the right direction to get some at least recent data. So we did a pilot run of our travel behavior inventory, our transit behavior inventory, and in that we did go out and do some interviews on the system. And one of the categories they did track was for going to the airport. And if I recall, during the meeting, I think it was our last transportation committee meeting, but I'll make sure I put the link to the presentation in the comments for you.
All right, thank you, Member Barber. And then Member Hollinshead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is broader than just the airport, but regarding the mask mandate dismissal, I've been on a bus since that happened, and they're not playing the recordings of federal mandate mask, of course, because of that ruling. But for instance, the New York MTA, the transit system in New York is keeping a mask mandate. So apparently it's up to localities if they want to keep the mask mandate. So I hope that we can track closely what Metro Transit and the opt-outs are going to do about mask mandates here locally, because I know when I ride the bus and the train, I want to keep my mask on, and I'd like everybody else to keep their mask on. So I'm just concerned that this will be an excuse to let down our guard, and we'll see another surge in the pandemic. And when we actually do have the option to keep a mask mandate on at least the transit services in the metro. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Member Hollinshead. I'm going to go to Council Member Payne, and I was going to introduce you earlier, Elliot, and then have you tell folks a little bit about yourself. So why don't you take that opportunity here too?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, hello, everyone. And my name's Elliot Payne. I use he, him pronouns, and I represent Ward 1 in Minneapolis, which is mostly Northeast Minneapolis with a little sliver of Southeast Como. And I'm a full-time biker and enthusiast of transit and climate action. So I'm really happy to be here as an alternate for Councilmember Koski. And then apologies, because I do have committee at 1 o'clock, so I'll only be here briefly. But my question was around the mask mandate as well. And I'm curious to know, it sounds like we can have our own local mask mandate at the airport, but it seems like that would be something we'd want to coordinate across the nation, if not internationally. And I was just curious if you could speak to how that coordination either like functionally works, or, you know, is there any discussion about maintaining at least a mask mandate within the premises of an airport? Because I'd imagine it's probably quite challenging if somebody's coming from one destination that has no mandate and arrives at another place with a mandate, if there's any kind of coordination at the airport level.
And
Crimmins or Ms. Reif?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chair, I would like to take that one, that I would think it'd be very difficult. ACI/North America would have to be involved in coordinating that with all the airports, because like you said, if you're leaving a destination that has no mask mandate and the airplane you're on has no mask mandate, and then you land at a location that has a mask mandate, you'll have to have people standing there with buckets of masks to pass out, because where they came from didn't require a mask. And then you're putting the poor employees in the middle of this thing. It was hard enough to require masks when there was a mandate. And now you're going to ask just the typical worker, the daily worker, to be like a police officer requiring masks. And how would they enforce that if somebody doesn't want to wear the mask? So this is a situation that's going to take a lot of discussion and a lot of coordination. I agree. And I'm sure there's agencies working on that, you know, as we speak. And maybe Bridget, if you have anything further.
Oh, well said.
All right, thanks, Ms. Reif. Other questions? Member Barber, you still got your hand up. Did you want to have it up? Okay. And then Ms. Ernst, Council Member Jalali's with us now too. So I want to make sure that.
Yes, I noted that.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. then let's go on to Councilmember Barber. Councilmember Barber?
Sorry about that. I was typing in the answer for the link for Amity. Okay, yes. So we do have a couple of things to report on today. One big one was we had a major milestone for the Blue Line extension with the release of the Metro Blue Line extension route modification report. Through technical analyses and extensive community input since August 2020, it is recommended to extend the existing Blue Line from Target Field Station along West Broadway Avenue in Minneapolis to County Road 81 in Crystal and Robbinsdale, and along West Broadway Avenue in Brooklyn Park. Following the release of the report, there is public comment period, which is open until May 18th. There are several ways to comment, and I will make sure I drop all of those into the chat box. I did also want to let everyone know that there are in-person community meetings going on throughout this time as well in Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Brooklyn Park, and Crystal. And I will also put with the contact information, I will make sure there's a link to the project website so you can see the release of the information of the proposed line. The second thing I wanted to report out is one of the council-funded opportunity that's going to be led by an external consultant is the Transportation Equity Policy Group. So MTS has awarded a contract for this equity evaluation of regional transportation investment study to a consultant team, including Bolton and MEC, the Center of Economic Inclusion and Bellwether Consulting. This study as part of the study, the consultant team will form a transportation equity policy group to guide the study and make recommendations to the council and the TAB. The study focuses on populations defined in federal Title VI and environmental justice laws. So the majority of the policy groups will be Black, Indigenous, and people of color or low-income communities. We are looking potentially to have 1 or 2 TAB members participate as well. Non-agency membership will be compensated for their time, travel, and childcare expenses for this particular group. This policy work group will meet every other month initially and may increase to monthly as study tasks require. The meetings will begin in late spring or summer, lasting for about 2 years. And the consultant team may be soliciting interest as soon as next week. So my request to all of you is if you know of people who may be interested in this, definitely please reach out to me. We do want to make sure we're representing a wide variety of communities and geographic districts and very, very broad, diverse representation. So if you know of people who might be interested in participating in this work group, please send information to myself or to Amy Benowitz. And the second one is we are in our new cycle for the Regional Development Guide. And one of the things that happens with that is the update for the Transportation Policy Plan for the 2050 cycle. So MTS is forming an ad hoc working group to engage with policymakers on the TPP development. The group will provide policy direction to staff developing the draft 2050 TPP and related elements of the Metropolitan Development Guide. Convening a focus group of policymakers, stakeholders together will help staff to assure alignment between the TPP and the Metropolitan Development Guide. A similar group was formed for the original 2040 TPP. However, we are proposing to expand the membership to a larger group of stakeholders. There are 11 TAB representatives that we're looking for, and I will let our chair go on to that. We also have 4 council members and 1 designee of Metro Transit, 1 of the Suburban Transit Association, 1 from the Council's Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee, and the Council's Equity Advisory Committee. The group will likely start meeting every other month starting later this spring through the end of 2024, and the group may meet monthly through the development of the draft, so late 2023 and early 2024. And with that, I will hand it over to Jim to talk about TAB's role in this.
Okay, well, I guess I could do that, and then we can go back to you for questions. So when we spoke with staff the other day, Deb and I and some others, we talked about this Transportation Policy Plan Working Group and the need to develop what I recall was the 2050 TPP, that long-range planning tool that we use. And they've been talking about doing this in conjunction with blending it into the Thrive update work that'll be going on as well. So this work that we would do on the 2050 TPP would be completed by 2024. As member Barber said, there are going to be 19 members on this work group. 11 of them will be tab members. So I need some colleagues to join me in this effort. I agreed I would serve as a city rep and as your chair. We need 2 more city reps. I'd like to have one of those city reps be a member of the city of a first class. That's either Minneapolis or St. Paul. And then the county 3 reps, citizen reps 3, modal rep 1, agency rep 1. So as Deb said, the meetings will be every other month for a while, and then it will get to be a little bit more time consumptive with meeting monthly. And then towards the end of that period, we'd probably switch back to every other month again. So if you're interested in this, you'll see an email. I'll send an email out through Elaine to everybody, and then let us know your interest. I can't remember, Deb, when was this supposed to kick off?
We were hoping to do it for May, but I think that's a little bit of a challenge. So I would expect the meetings to first start in June. Right now, we're trying to determine if they can be virtual meetings or if we need to meet in person. So we'll definitely get that information out. But there's definitely not a quorum of TAB. We just need to make sure there's not a quorum of the council's transportation committee.
That's a good point as well. Yep, that could be. That was the initial discussion, was could it be virtual, and we're still trying to get a legal answer on that based on state law. Okay, and then it won't start until June. So you get a little bit of time to think about it, but I think Elaine and I will try to get that email out maybe yet this week, and then as soon as you give it some consideration, let us know if you're interested, and we'll get this transportation policy plan work group populated and then go to work in June on this important work for the region in terms of its visioning. So, and that's about it for me too, for a chair's report. The executive committee met earlier today and walked through everything that we're going to do today. So there's no sense in being redundant about that. And that'll conclude my report. Does anybody have any questions for Member Barber? Met Council related? Okay, Member Foster?
Really quick one. Is Metro Transit still planning to have masks on board up at the front near the bus drivers to hand out to folks?
Honestly, I don't know, but I can find out for you.
Cool. I think that would be a really good idea. Like, even with masking no longer required, providing those makes them accessible and available to a lot of people who normally don't get that access.
Yeah, I'll reach out to someone from Metro Transit during the meeting and see if I can find out anything.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Member Foster. Member Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. Do you have an update on hiring for operators?
It still continues to be a challenge. I don't have numbers in front of me of where we're at. We definitely are very actively continuing to search for additional operators. We are getting some interest in our hiring events, which is good. I think the bigger concern, like we are in a position right now where we're in a better spot with our current staff. We definitely struggled during the Omicron surge with our current slate of operators. The concern now is as things start to open back up and we need get to a point where we can expand service. But I can tell you it's first and foremost in the front of everyone's mind at Metro Transit, both from the perspective of the operators as well as some of our public safety officials as well.
All right. Member Lewis, you raised an issue that we discussed at the exec committee, and that is potentially in May when we'll be back live. We're going to try to get an update also with respect to their efforts at hiring additional public safety officers and personnel. So that's coming up as well. And then Commissioner Luck, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know that this is necessarily directed at Member Barber, but we recently were entertained, maybe is a good way to put it, with a letter, with an article in the Star Tribune from a Tim Harlow regarding North Star service as it relates to Twins games. And as people probably know, I'm chair of the Regional Rail Authority in Anoka County, and the article pretty clearly threw Anoka County under the bus. The part that I want to make real clear here today is that essentially Met Council, Metro Transit put out a worksheet, 1-OP Transitway Service Characteristics on October 6/21, detailing what service characteristics were going to be there, in which in 2.05 service, special event service, there's none. So there was no plan to provide any sort of special event service. And then the article as was written and the representative from MnDOT feeding that information to the Star and Tribune indicated that because Anoka County was withholding payment due to a breach of contract, that they would not be able to provide service for the train trips this year. That being said, in order to change service at all with BNSF, it requires a 60-day notice. So we want to keep that in the back of our mind, and that 60-day notice was not given to BNSF, and they could not initiate service without that 60-day notice. But really, I'm bringing this up today because it's an issue of integrity. It's an issue of integrity, and it has to do with the allocation of funding for Metro Transit and the requests that they have that comes before this board, and the information that they provide to us to make those decisions. And I'm going to hopefully be real clear in saying that I'm disappointed in their integrity, because this puts me in a difficult position now. I want to trust what they're telling me on the projects that they want funding on, but after going through this political, I'll use the word shit show, it is truly a problem. And we have their own documentation to prove that they're unethical. So I would encourage those that that have any sort of connection to this, that sit on this board, or those that are listening in staff-wise or whatever the case is, that we take this very seriously. And this has definitely put me in a difficult position to try and value any sort of information they provide me in the future in any sort of light of being ethical. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Commissioner Look. Yeah, that would have been a good item to hold for the end of the meeting. I don't know if Member Barber has any comment, but we could certainly take this up towards the end of the meeting, where after we get through the main agenda.
I have one very brief comment, and we can talk about it more at the end. So Anoka County is responsible for 34% of the North Star operating subsidy, but has not made payments for the last 21 months of service beginning in July 2020. The distribution of that percentage was an element, an agreement among the counties during the dissolution of CTIP. So that was where the agreement was formed. We would love to add North Star service to provide better options to those returning to office, no different than any other services. We are getting we've surveyed former and current North Star riders, and which suggested adding more trips to the schedule would attract additional riders. With the expected acceleration of return to office and the construction of Highway 10, this really is the perfect time to add North Star trip options and try and increase North Star ridership. Providing twin service is another great opportunity to promote North Star services. However, at this time, we cannot consider adding commute trips or event trips if we are not being paid by our largest county payer.
All right, well, this sounds like something that shouldn't be in front of the tab to me. It's an operational and contractual issue. I can, I'm hearing what you both are saying, but maybe you can continue that dialogue. We can bring it up at the end of the meeting, but the more I listen, the more I think it's really outside our purview. I appreciate the Commissioner's comments, but and your response. Maybe the simple thing to do is to take it up briefly at the end of the meeting and try to encourage everybody involved with what became a complicated situation for folks, probably contractually and politically to deal with. All right, let's move on. Chair Solberg, Chair of the TAC, do you have anything you want to report out on from a TAC report standpoint, or would you prefer to move right into the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll give a couple updates, and I'll review a brief overview of the consent items.
Thank you.
Chair Hovland,
Yes.
STA has an update. We normally go after Ms. Barber.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I thought that we were going to do you quarterly and that the first report was going to be in June, but go ahead.
That was more of a presentation. We had agreed that STA would actually just give a verbal update after Ms. Barber went each meeting, and then once a quarter there'd be an STA member that would actually do a presentation to TAB, and that's planned for June.
Thanks for that reminder. All right, go ahead, Member Keeley.
Oh, thank you. And just going to go through these highlights. The report this month is a little smaller than last month, which was our first ever, so we had a lot to share, and we appreciate everyone's engagement and responses. Express ridership continues upward trend among all the suburban transit providers. On-demand service continues to experience explosive growth. Both MBTA and Southwest services are experiencing ridership levels above pre-COVID, and Southwest Prime is seeing the highest ridership since they started it, which they innovated it in our
consent items. So with that,
what's going on?
John, we're getting a report here. You're coming in over the top of Member Keeley.
He was pretty broken up too. I wonder if he even heard.
Yeah, he might not have heard. John, we're going to have Member Keeley give a report on the suburban transit providers, and then we'll come back to you. Yeah, I see your note in the chat that you haven't spoken for 2 minutes, but somehow we got the echo of your voice. It must have been Mike. We'll blame Mike Barnes. He keeps hearing your voice, and now he's sharing it with all of us.
Yeah, he's recording it. Yeah, that was a very strange technical recording playback there that was highly delayed.
All right, go ahead, Member Keeley.
Thank you. MBTA stats, March had the highest system ridership since pre-pandemic, 73,628 rides, a 28% jump from February, and nearly double the ridership of March of 2021. Year-to-date ridership, express ridership has grown 170% from this point in 2021. Obviously, that's all indicative of employers in downtown making announcements of bringing their workers back to the office. Year-to-date, Minneapolis ridership is up 335% from this point in 2021, and express ridership accounts for 56.7% of total ridership in 2022 so far. Microtransit, just really where the explosive growth is coming from, maybe not pandemic related per se. These growth numbers have been happening consistently throughout. MBTA Connect had a record-breaking month of 6,877 rides. Servicing continuous growth. Average monthly ridership in 2021 was 3,088 rides, so over double. I also note that in our last update, Egan, the expansion of our microtransit MBTA Connect into Egan, in a very short amount of time, Egan became over 50% of all MBTA Connect rides. So explosive growth and demand in the city of Egan for this microtransit ride service. Southwest Prime has seen 120% increase in ridership from 2021 and 337 increase from April 2020. Maple Grove, My Ride, recently expanded service to include Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center and to a food shelf in Rogers. And Plymouth Click and Ride ridership is up 95%, at 95% of pre-COVID levels. So Plymouth is probably experiencing the least amount of explosive growth in that microtransit on-demand service, but it's very healthy everywhere. And then just a couple of notes: regional solicitation applications. MBTA is applying, has 5 applications in 3 categories. One, a TDM, a transit connection specialist. 2, for transit expansion, a service from Shakopee to Brooklyn Center on an express route, and an express route to Rice and University in downtown St. Paul from the South Metro. And the other 2 are transit modernization, Apple Valley Transit Station modernization package, and a technology and ADA enhancements grant request. Total federal requests of 11,000,008, project costs of 14,000,008. And then Southwest Transit has applications. They want to expand Southwest Prime on-demand service to the north with a $7 million grant request, and the Golden Triangle Mobility Hubs, $6 million. So all of that totals a lot of dollars. Anyway, I do have some background on the grants and that if there's any questions, but other than that, that's all the report from the STA this month. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, great news there on the acceleration of ridership. All right, questions for Member Keeley? All right, let's go back to TAC Chair Solberg and get back to his report. Chair Solberg?
Yep, this is John. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, yeah, I'm having some service problems, so Steve Peterson may end up taking over for me. Wanted to give a quick update on TAC, our meeting 2 weeks ago. First time since we adjusted the bylaws that we've had public invitation to speak at the beginning of TAC. There was nobody there that was registered, so that moved on. But additionally, we have decided as a TAC, because we are not required, we will remain remote until September. And at that point, we will reevaluate whether we will be doing hybrid or in-person or fully remote meetings. That being said, I will review the consent agenda items here very quickly for the tab so that you have maybe a little more in-depth information on those. Really, items 2214, 2216, and 2218 really are local cost increases for regionally selected projects. The first one being Minneapolis, it's a set of 3 projects. The federal funds will remain the same. Costs have gone up in part due to inflation on some of the commodities, but also as a part of project engineering. The second project being MnDOT's 169 cable median barrier. There's a cost increase and a slight change in the project termini. It's just a little bit different, I think a little bit shorter, but again, costs have increased a little bit. The state is contributing its HSIP along with state dollars to make up the difference in cost. And finally, 2218, which is St. Paul Kellogg Bridge reconstruction. For clarification for folks, that is the Kellogg Bridge that's by the River Center, part of that parking complex that's all there. And the city is increasing the amount of local funds to make that project whole. It doesn't affect the regional funds that have been awarded to that project. And then the last project in the consent agenda item that I want to refer to, which is a little bit different, is that 2217. And that's a little bit different from the standpoint of it's $2.5 million of congressionally directed spending that came out of the federal transportation authorization bill that's allocated directly to Carver County for preliminary engineering along Trunk Highway 5. Normally, most agencies do not use federal funds in project development. And so that's why this one's a little bit different. It is combined with a project that will expand the preliminary engineering of a project that Carver County is working on in that vicinity that already received federal solicitation funds. But because it is a federal grant, it has to be in the STIP. And then I will cover the non-consent agenda items after the consent business roll call, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. Thanks, Chair Solberg. And to make it clear, these may be regionally significant projects, but there are no regional funds that are helping with the increased costs. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's all local or state funds that are bearing the brunt of the increase in costs on these projects.
Or in the case of the Carver County matter, it's federal discretionary funding, earmarking.
Correct. Not the region's purview.
Great. Does anybody have any questions, or is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
Shuttle moves. Anderson second.
All right.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we got wind shuttle moving, member Anderson seconding the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Ms. Ernst.
Anderson,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Barber, Barnes,
Aye.
Crimmins,
Aye.
Dugan,
Aye.
Foster, Geisler,
Aye.
Giuliani Stevens,
Aye.
Gottel,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Holberg,
Yes.
Hollinshead,
Aye.
Jalali,
Jalali, Jepson.
yes, thank you. Aye.
Aye.
Karwoski,
Aye.
Keeley,
Aye.
Payne,
Aye.
Lewis,
Aye.
Watson,
Aye.
Look,
Aye.
Malichnik,
Aye.
Martinson,
Yes.
Mattis Castillo, Bewan,
Aye.
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Petrick, Schember,
Aye.
Stephenson, Ulrich, Williams,
Aye.
Wind Shuttle,
Aye.
and Workman.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. The consent agenda items are approved in that single motion. Let's move on then, Chair Solberg, to the non-consent portion of the agenda, the action items that we need to address, starting with 2022-12, the public participation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this first item, 22-12, is really the result of the FHWA evaluation or evaluation of the MPO, called the TMA certification process, which is required every 4 years by the Code of Federal Regulations. During that evaluation back in late 2020 and early 21, FHWA had 3 required or recommendations coming out of that review, and that dealt with how the MPO addresses public engagement. So first of those being that they public participation include tribal governments. That was the first recommendation. The second is that they identify a cycle for updating the public participation plan. And really the third, that the council develop and use effective measures for the public engagement and engagement process. That being said, staff has over the last year been working with other MPOs around the country doing some work to determine how their processes work, and ultimately ended up with a recommendation that the council use an addendum to the Met Council's public engagement plan rather than developing a separate public engagement plan. That way they can address those needs specifically called out by FHWA while not creating additional confusion by having a separate public engagement plan. That being said, this will move forward if TAB recommends approval to the Transportation Committee and Met Council for release, public comment, and then ultimately adoption. And with that, I believe Sarah Maskey may be available if there's more specific details, but ultimately this comes down to FHWA requirements and the council's response to those.
All right, colleagues, are there any questions for Chair Solberg on this particular matter? Otherwise, we could entertain a motion to request that for the TAB to request the draft transportation addendum to the Metropolitan Council public engagement plan be released for public comment by the Metropolitan Council.
So moved, Gottel.
All right, thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Gattel moves. Is there a second?
Second, Karwoski.
Second, Commissioner Karwoski. Any further discussion? All right, roll call, please, with respect to a potential adoption of 2022-12.
Anderson,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Barnes,
Aye.
Crimmins,
Aye.
Dugan,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Geisler,
Aye.
Giuliani Stevens,
Aye.
Gattel,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Solberg,
Yes.
Hollinshead,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Jepson,
Aye.
Karwoski,
Aye.
Keeley, Keeley,
Member Keeley?
Payne,
Aye.
Lewis,
Aye.
Watson, Watson,
I'm sorry. Aye.
Look,
Aye.
Maluchnik. Randy, are you there?
Randy? Here, Member Keeley's back.
Martinson,
Aye.
Matas Castillo,
Aye.
Bewen,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Petrick, Schember,
Aye.
Stephenson,
Aye.
Ulrich,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Windshuttle,
Aye.
and Workman.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. 2022-12 is approved. We have a recommendation on the public participation plan for release to the public to be sent on to the Met Council. The next item, 2022-13, I'm going to turn to Chair Solberg in a minute. It's actually an item we could have had on the consent agenda because the tab roll with respect to this potential TIP amendment on Southwest LRT funding increase is limited to really amending the TIP to reflect accurate costs. This did, however, end up in a conversation at the TAC, and we thought instead of putting it on the consent agenda and having someone remove it, we would just handle it as a separate matter. So just keep in mind, as you may want to express a thought or two on this, that our role here is limited to amending the TIP to reflect the accurate costs and this contribution by Metro Transit with the use of their federal funds to assist with this accurate costing. So Chair Solberg, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you summarized the project quite well at this point, but to go a little bit further, this is a request by Metro Transit to increase the cost of the Southwest LRT by $62.5 million that's in the TIP, right? So of that $62.5 million, $50 million is federal. And as you can all see in your staff report, which may or may not have been confusing to some, effectively what Metro Transit is doing is utilizing federal funds from other projects that they currently have or have already been or leftover money from projects from 20 and 21. Now, that being said, those funds would shift to Southwest LRT. The remaining projects that you see in the staff report that are lined out will continue forward and be developed by Metro Transit utilizing other funds that are not required to be in the TIP. Okay, so again, the reason for the TIP is because of federal funds. So Metro Transit would be utilizing local funds to develop the fare collection and the preventive maintenance and the bus acquisition and so on. So TAB did also have, or TAC did have that discussion trying to understand if these projects were moving forward. That was confirmed that they will. And then just beyond that, I guess for all those, again, this project is very similar to those other projects that were reviewed in the consent agenda item. as they are local funds being utilized by, or moving forward, it's a cost increase that is being asked to be approved by TAB. I guess that's all I have, Chair.
All right, thank you for that more detailed explanation of what the action item is about. Are there questions from any of our colleagues on the tab with regard to the proposed action? Commissioner Luck?
Oh, I was going to move it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions as it relates to this. First of all, I believe if I'm reading this right, this is a defederalization. We're going through a defederalization on this?
I'll have to defer to.
I think Nick Thompson's with us, and he may be able to answer that question.
Okay.
Nick, you might be on mute.
The reason why I'm asking, Mr. Chair, about defederalization, of course, is Anoka County went through defederalization. You'll recall back when we were meeting in person, and the issue of the federal goals came up in terms of disadvantaged businesses. We were required at that point. We were trying to defederalize $3 million. We were required at that point of spending some $400,000 on ped ramp improvements and that sort of thing, training local DBEs to do that type of work. And so I want to make sure that I guess this process is being held to the same standard. That's the number one concern I have, is that it's being held to the same standard and those goals are being met as well.
Mr. Chair, can you hear my audio?
Yes, I can hear that. But I think Commissioner Luck wanted to finish his
Okay.
comment, and then we'll go to you.
That's all right. We can go to him on that one. That'd be fine.
All right. Yeah. So the first question is this a defederalization issue? And if so, is the council going to be held to the same standards as Anoka County was being held to when we had a defederalization matter in front of us a while back for them?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Luck and members, yeah, we're gonna maintain all projects following the federal process. So the Southwest LRT will remain a federal project with DBE goals. And then the projects that we're realigning funding for, will maintain them as FTA procurements. So we'll set DBE goals on those also. So no changes to that approach on these projects.
That cause any follow-on, Commissioner?
Yeah, so that's fine. I mean, I'm asking the question on the on the standards being applied equally. Okay. On the second issue, part of the benefit of being in this position for a long time is historical knowledge. I sat on CTIB years ago, and in the dissolution of CTIB, and I believe Member Barber indicated this agreement as it related to North Star. Also, there was agreement as it related to Hennepin County, particular to cost overruns on Southwest. And the question I have is that agreement being honored with now these cost overruns being absorbed by Metro Transit?
I think either Commissioner Gattell or Mr. Thompson could answer that question, but I think that's where the matching funds are coming from.
That is correct. County is still a provider of the largest amount of the dollars that fund this project.
Mr. Thompson, anything you want to add?
Based on the dissolution agreement, there's no conflict with this action and what was agreed upon in 2018 that I would see.
All right, and I think Member Stevens had her hand up in the air as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a few questions as well. So as I understand it, there can be no additional federal dollars to this project through the process. So Metro Transit is taking dollars from other projects. And did I hear you correctly that those other projects, there is funding for all of those? So I have that question. And then kind of the timing, because I think in the notes, somebody else asked, because we know there's going to be additional overruns of 450 million. I don't remember what the number was, but will they be coming back for additional? And the answer was yes. So why now as opposed to waiting? And then finally, I think I read that, did the governor sign a bill or something to audit this project? And how does that relate to the timing of us taking action on additional dollars? So I'm just, just kind of a little confused as to the timing and the costs and our role and in this particular item, even though I know, Mr. Chair, you said it might have been a consent item otherwise.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate before somebody else answers from the staff standpoint that my understanding is that our role here, based on our traditional role, is limited to amending the tip or potentially amending the tip to reflect accurate costs, and that's what they're asking for in their motion.
Just as a follow-up then, Mr. Chair, do we generally take federal funds from other projects then? And if we do, and when are we assured that those other projects will then be fully funded?
I'll turn to Metro Transit on that, but I know that this is a reallocation of federal money by Metro Transit. And they have the ability to do it apparently internally and still complete those other projects, which I think they indicated, but I'll turn to Member Thompson Mr. Thompson on that.
Mr. Chair, members, yes, this is a practice that has been done in this region in the past. The federal funds that are being moved to this are formula funds that the Metro Transit receives every year as an allocation that applies to capital projects. In past examples of it, a good example that's probably comparable is on the Blue Line, the original Blue Line. Funds 5307, same type of funding was added to the project so that an addition to Mall of America station and connection could be made. And so the 5307 is a good flexible federal source that both Metro Transit receives and MTS and the suburban transit providers receive that allows them to be flexible with their capital funding. And then the question on the audit, the legislative audit does, we're anticipating they'll kick off in May and go through at least a year. So that's independent of funding actions.
Member Stevens, any follow on?
Yeah, just one follow-up, just kind of the big elephant in the room. What about the big overrun that's going to happen? Is that something that's going to be addressed? And can you give us any more information on that at this point?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, when we announced in January the additional, the settlement with the contractor, we did announce that there'd be an extension of time, and that's where we announced the need for additional funding, and that the funding partners, both local, county, council, where we could, and federal, we'd be working with them. Now, this is a step one, I would say, in resolving that funding gap. But we're continuing to work with our funding partners, and depending on how the solution comes about, that solution isn't there yet, but it could come back before TAB, depending on the funding source that resolves this. So there's still work going on that, but this is like step one, I would say, in resolving some of that gap in funding that we need.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I feel like there's a lot of missing pieces on this project, but thank you for answering those.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Anyone else? Is there a motion that the Transportation Advisory Board recommend adoption of an amendment to the 2022-2025 TIP to increase the cost of the Southwest LRT Green Line Extension 2022 project by $62.5 million, $50 million of it being federal money, which is the requested motion for 2022-13. Is there a motion to that effect?
So move, Gotel.
Second, Johnson.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Gotel, second by Member Johnson. Further discussion? Roll call, please, Ms. Ernst.
Anderson,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Barnes,
Aye.
Crimmins,
Aye.
Dugan,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Geisler,
Aye.
Giuliani Stevens,
No.
Gattell,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Holberg,
No.
Hollinshead,
Aye.
Jalali,
Yes.
Jepson,
Aye.
Karwoski,
Aye.
Keeley,
No.
Payne, Payne,
He has to leave the
Lewis.
meeting.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Lewis,
Aye.
Watson,
Aye.
Look,
No.
Maluchnik,
Aye.
Martinson,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
Bewan,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Petrick, Schember,
Aye.
Stephenson,
Aye.
Ulrich,
No.
Williams,
Aye.
Windshuttle,
Aye.
and Workman.
No.
2022-13 is approved. Thanks, folks, for that good discussion. One more action item for us today, 2022-15, which is a potential TIP amendment. The I-94 East Metro Freight Project has been added. We need to add that into the TIP. And I think Commissioner Karwoski will be supportive of that, wants to make the motion. But let's go first to Chair Solberg for an explanation.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this project or this motion in front of you, add the project, the freight improvement project on the 94 corridor at 494, 694 out in Woodbury, in Oakdale, Woodbury area. And so a couple months ago, this body did approve the TPP amendment that added the freight improvement projects from the freight solicitation. This is the next step in that it's adding the project to the TIP. So putting that financial picture in the federal document that lets this project move forward. So again, this is a new auxiliary lane on I-94 from essentially the 494, 694 out to Woodbury Drive. It also amends the project, the associated preservation project that is tied to it, and adds some guardrail and noise wall to it. And so you can see those numbers down on the third page, but ultimately ends up in that vicinity of a $120 million project that will be moving forward. And just a additional piece of this is that normally on these sorts of projects, you have to do an air quality determination. This project, the region, while regionally significant, is not located in the existing air quality maintenance area. Therefore, a new conformity determination is not required on this particular project. And with that, I think I'll conclude my comments, Mr. Chair.
All right, good. Commissioner Karwoski, did you have any comment?
No, it's a good project. And I would like to move it forward and make a motion that the Transportation Advisory Board adopt an amendment to the 2022 through 2025 TIP to add project line funding, a new auxiliary lane for I-94, I-694, I-94 and Oakdale to Washington County to Washington County project line funding for a new auxiliary. I'm sorry. I'm going to start over.
Washington County Highway 19.
Yep, Highway 19 in Woodbury, SP number 8282-132F, and to add a guardrail and noise wall to MnDOT's associated I-94 maintenance project located between Oakdale and the St. Croix River, SP number 8282-132 for the purpose of release for public comment.
All right.
Second
Maluchnik. Was it Member Stevens? Did you want to second that?
Yes.
All right. All right, we got a motion and a second with respect to 2022-15 as stated by Commissioner Karwoski. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Member Dugan.
Yes, thank you. May I ask John, you know, I'm in favor of it. Is just, what is the actual site location of this? Is this going to affect the interchange, or is it strictly an extra lane eastbound? And because I drive that intersection frequently, and it is a monster, and particularly if you've got a truck behind you. And so, what is it actually doing? The auxiliary lane, is it a speed up lane, or I mean not a speed up, but a speed up acceleration lane?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dugan, yeah, so this particular project is adding a lane from that 494 interchange right out to Woodbury. Part of it does include what we call a collector distributor lane. So that's already out there today. So this effectively adds that lane for over a mile, but beyond just a capacity issue at that particular interchange. It's also a safety improvement at the interchange. We do have the estimated safety improvement out there is about a 15% overall safety improvement, but it's certain segments of that project, it's above a 60% crash reduction savings. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Solberg.
Any other questions or comments from tab members? All right. Roll call, please, Ms. Ernst, with respect to 2022-15.
Anderson,
Aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Barnes,
Aye.
Crimmins,
Aye.
Dugan,
Aye.
Foster,
Aye.
Geisler,
Aye.
Giuliani Stevens,
Aye.
Patel,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Solberg,
Yes.
Hollinshead,
Aye.
Jalali,
Yes.
Jepson,
Aye.
Karwoski,
Aye.
Keeley,
Aye.
Payne. Oh, sorry. Lewis,
Aye.
Watson,
Aye.
Look,
Aye.
Malichnik,
Aye.
Martinson,
Aye.
Mattis Castillo,
Aye.
Bewan,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Schember,
Aye.
Stephenson,
Aye.
Ulrich,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Windshuttle,
Aye.
and Workman.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, everybody. We've got an approval on 2022-15, and that completes our action items. And we'll move now on to the information portion of the agenda. We've got a real interesting presentation, I think, today from Mark Doctor that Steve Peterson and I think Heidi Solberg are going to introduce. But I know in some of our multiple prior conversations at the tab, we've been concerned about the increasing risk for people moving around the system in a non-motorized way, and some of the things we can do to enhance safety for those that are most vulnerable amongst us using those systems. So, Steve Peterson, I'll turn it to you, and you can decide how you want to handle the introductions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, this is the first of several months where we're going to be tackling safety as we head into the next transportation policy plan. One of the topics that we heard from you that you'd like to learn more about. We heard our guest speaker here today. We did a MPO peer exchange with Federal Highways Department last October, where we brought in virtually, that is, Denver, San Francisco, Portland, and Philadelphia to talk about what other MPOs are doing as they build out safety programs. And it turns out they're doing quite a bit in a whole host of areas. One of the presentations we heard as part of that peer exchange was from Mark Doctor. We thought it was worthwhile to bring it to this group, and we actually invited all the technical committee members to listen in today because we thought it was worth their time as well. So Heidi will kind of expand upon the introduction here. Heidi.
Thanks, Steve.
One thing I just wanted to mention, as he mentioned, this is a presentation that we heard, a similar one in our peer exchange in the fall, focused on safety planning at the regional level. So I know a lot of you had questions earlier this year when we presented our annual safety targets, and many of those are ones that we'll be able to work to address in our upcoming safety action plan that will be kicking off later this year. We'll focus on vehicle crashes and bicycle vehicle crashes as a follow-up to our pedestrian safety action plan that will be wrapping up the first few months. I'll just briefly introduce Mark, but actually before that, Greg, I just wanted to check if Mark was able to share his slides or if you need to do those. Okay, thank you. So Mark, if you'd like to share your slides after the introduction, sounds like you're free to do so. Thanks, Greg. So just real briefly, Mark Doctor is a senior safety and design engineer with the Federal Highway Administration. He provides technical assistance and training to advance the application of innovative and performance-based safety and design practices on a national level. Mark is the co-lead for the FHWA Cross-Office Working Group on the Safe System Approach. And he also provides technical services in the areas of intersection safety, vulnerable road user safety, and innovative intersection design. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Mark Doctor.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to present. I'm glad the peer exchange was so well received and you found the presentation on the safe system approach so beneficial. So hopefully you can see my screen. I do have a presentation
we can
show. Thank you for that confirmation. Just put it into slide show mode. All right, very good. So the safe system approach, I call the presentation, what is it and why is it getting so much attention? If you haven't heard about the safe system approach, it's something that is being promoted on so many levels. The US DOT's recent National Roadway Safety Strategy highlighted the safe system approach as the way we truly get to zero. So I want to talk about what it is, but to begin, I'm going to talk about what it's not. So it's not a slogan. It's not a program. What it is a different way of thinking about the road safety problem. And when we think about the problem differently, we can think about solutions differently. So it's a light bulb moment. When you get the safe system approach, it's like a little light bulb going off like, ah, yeah, now I get it. So it's a principles-based approach, and that can be challenging because we like things that are definitive and easy to understand. Well, the safe system approach is a lot of things, but specifically it revolves around 6 principles that I'm going to talk about. To achieve a safe system, it requires strengthening all of the 5 elements of the system. Safe roads is only one element. We can't achieve a safe system solely through safe roads. It has to be all the elements working together. Now, safe roads and safe speeds, they're an important part, but not the only part. And when we think about safe roads, it's not a binary yes or no. It's a continuum of how close are we getting toward a safe system. We may never have an absolute, but the closer we get toward a safe system, the better we will see safety benefits, a reduction in fatalities and severe injuries among all users. So it's not something that happens overnight. It takes decades of progress, but as progress gets made, the improvements show up. And we have a national road safety problem. If we look at highway fatalities over the last several decades, yeah, we made progress throughout the 1970s and 80s and 90s even. But if we look at the last 10 years, at best, you can say we've plateaued. At worst, we've kicked up. Even before the pandemic, we had basically plateaued. And then certainly in 2020 and 2021, unfortunately, we're seeing the numbers tick up. It's even worse if we focus on pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities, vulnerable road users. It's gotten significantly worse for those users. The problem is also one that is kind of split between urban and rural, although urban fatalities slightly more than half. The rural fatalities, even though it's about 45%, rural fatal and severe injury crashes are overrepresented when you think in terms of the population and the vehicle miles of travel. So it's a challenge, both urban, rural, all road users. So if we ask the question, why are people killed or seriously injured on the roads? Well, traditionally, we focused on things like behavioral issues, impaired driving, aggressive driving, distracted driving. And yes, these are all issues. These continue to be factors. Even in the pandemic, arguably, some of these have gotten worse. Or another way of trying to focus in on the problem is to look at the people. Are they pedestrians, bicyclists, commercial motor vehicle operators, younger drivers, older drivers? Well, rather than try to focus on people or behavior, here's an alternate way of thinking about the answer to this question, why? People are killed or seriously injured on the roads because the collision forces that are transferred on the human body exceed tolerable thresholds. If we want to blame something, let's blame kinetic energy. And I really love this quotation from an English epidemiologist. He says, in the road injury epidemic, it's kinetic energy that's the pathogen. It's a different way of thinking about the road safety problem. So under this approach, under the safe system approach, first we acknowledge that humans are going to make mistakes. Unintentionally or intentionally, mistakes will happen. We're only humans. And when we're driving or walking or riding a bike, it's not realistic to expect that we would never be perfect drivers or road users. So the approach acknowledges people are going to make mistakes. On the roads, those mistakes can lead to crashes. The challenge then becomes keeping the consequences of those crashes survivable. And we do that by managing the impact on the human body. So the safe system approach, it's not really new, and it's not something that is created in the United States. It actually originated in Sweden back in the 90s, the Netherlands under their sustainable safety program, and other countries, Australia, New Zealand, they have had great success in adopting how they design and operate roadways with this philosophy, this approach. So the Federal Highway Administration has created this pictogram, and I'm going to use this pictogram to describe the 6 principles of the safe system that's on the outside and the 5 elements of a safe system. So let's start with the 6 foundational principles, and it starts with the first one, that death and serious injury are unacceptable. It's almost like a call to action. It's an awakening that we have to do better. And the aspirational goal of getting to zero, because there is no other target that is reasonable. So we've had these Vision Zero efforts, the Road to Zero, the Vision Zero Network, and then most recently our US DOT National Roadway Safety Strategy that acknowledges this goal of reaching zero. But to talk about zero, that goal is 0 fatalities and 0 serious injuries. It's not 0 crashes. It's a subtle but important distinction. We're trying to eliminate death and serious injury, but we acknowledge that there will be crashes because humans make mistakes. That's the second key principle. So as road users, we will inevitably make mistakes. Now, we can try our best to make it less likely that humans are going to make mistakes. And that's another key part of the safe system approach, applying our knowledge of human factors, both in roadway design and vehicle design. But we know that humans will never be perfect. So crashes will happen. The trick is to then make them survivable. That's where the third principle comes in. Humans are vulnerable, and the human body has a certain threshold during a collision before harm occurs. And as a very simplistic example, I love this analogy. If you go to an amusement park and the bumper car rides, right? So here we have people crashing into each other intentionally. and they're enjoying it. They're having fun. Now, obviously, this is a very simplistic example, but there are some parallels here. So first of all, we have vehicles that can tolerate those crash forces. They have nice bumpers around them. The occupants are strapped in, and the kinetic energy in the system is managed. You can only go so fast. And so it's an example of trying to manage the system such that not only is harm avoided, but actually having fun. So that's a simplistic example. If we carry that forward to the real world, all right, obviously it gets more challenging. But as an engineer, and I'm a roadway design engineer, this excites me because designing for safe roads becomes an exercise in managing kinetic energy. And we don't have to be a physicist to understand all of the details, but the kinetic energy of a collision depends upon the type of crash we're dealing with, the most critical being that of a pedestrian being hit by a vehicle. There's the lower threshold there. But then things like at an intersection, a T-bone crash, a 90-degree T-bone collision where we're being hit on our side doors, the passenger side or driver's side doors. Actually, that's where our vehicles give us the least amount of protection. We have the most protection with the front of the car, a crumple zone, and a head-on collision, say in a rural 2-lane roadway. Well, that's where the speeds are typically going to be higher. So it really is a matter of considering the context, the scenario, the protection that our vehicles may give us, and then designing accordingly to try to minimize the probability of that collision being a severe outcome, a fatality. At intersections, it's not just the speed, but also the angle of impact. This is research that we have learned from the Australians, who have done a lot in terms of kinetic energy management modeling. And if we can alter the angle of collision from a 90-degree T-bone type of crash down to about 40 degrees, it's about the same reduction in kinetic energy as if the speeds of the colliding vehicles were 20 miles an hour less. So even if we can't reduce speeds, sometimes through engineering, we can change the energy of the collision. A roundabout is a great example of this principle. Now, first of all, a roundabout has fewer conflict points with less potential for a collision. We don't have those direct left turns. The roundabout generally reduces speed. The approach, the splitter island, generally slows traffic down. But even if traffic doesn't slow down, and even if a driver violates the traffic control device, they blow right through the yield sign, the collision that would occur based upon the geometry of the roundabout, instead of it being a 90-degree kind of a T-bone type of crash, it would be more like 40 degrees. And so even under that worst case scenario of a driver not slowing and a driver not yielding, when a collision results, that angle of impact difference can make the crash more survivable. And we know that roundabouts do have a demonstrated safety benefit, especially against the severe and fatal crashes. Shared responsibility. This is where the 5 elements of the safe system come in. You may hear about the ease of safety, enforcement, engineering, education, and emergency medical services. Well, those 4 E's are nested inside the 5 elements of a safe system. It starts with safe road users. We certainly try to educate and promote safe driving behavior. We hope that users follow the rules. We hope they're not distracted or impaired. And that applies to all user groups. And recently, the Governor's Highway Safety Association produced a report, a great report, that talks about the behavioral aspects of the safe system approach, a very important component, but just one of the 5 elements. Safe vehicles. We do know that vehicles are getting safer and safer. We have active safety measures that help keep us from being in a collision in the first place. Things like lane departure warning systems or forward collision warning systems. And then when we are in a crash, seatbelts, airbags, crumple zones all help make the crash more survivable. And in the future, as we leverage connected and automated vehicle technologies, vehicle safety will get only better. Safe speeds. Well, there are some roads that are designed for higher speeds. If you think about a rural interstate, where we have good clear zones and wide medians and barriers, those are roads that are designed to allow for higher speeds within certain limits. But most of our roads, whether they be rural two-lane roadways that are twisting and turning with trees and hazards, or in an urban context with a lot of pedestrians or bicyclists, well, those roads just aren't designed to accommodate higher speeds. So the safe system approach is about matching operating speeds to the conditions that exist on the roadway. And from a pedestrian safety standpoint, it's a particular important message. We know that a slight increase in speed can have a significant effect on the outcome. If a pedestrian is hit at 20 miles an hour, there's a high probability of survival or a minor injury. At 30 miles an hour, it becomes about a 50-50 chance. At 40 and higher, the odds aren't very good. So there is a definite pedestrian focus with the safe system approach. Safe roads, which is what many of us in transportation are focusing on, well, it's important to remember that it's not a yes or a no. It's not an absolute. Safe roads is basically a continuum. How can we design and operate our roads to reduce the likelihood, the probability of a severe outcome in a collision? And as we become more consistent with getting toward the principles of a safe system approach, what essentially happens is we're reducing the likelihood, the probability of a fatal or severe outcome. We may never get to zero, but as you get closer and closer to that reduced probability of a fatal or severe injury, our numbers will improve. And we learn from other countries that it's a journey to go down the safe system approach. It doesn't happen overnight, but as progress is made, the benefits result. So our goal is to operate and design our roads to try to get on this continuum and reduce the likelihood of error and reduce the likelihood of a fatal or severe consequence. There's some parallels that we can draw from occupational safety. This is from the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. They have their Prevention Through Design program, and they create this hierarchy of control of what's effective, and the most effective being if we can physically eliminate the hazard, remove the hazard, or substitute it with something less hazardous. Well, this concept of a hierarchy of benefit is catching on in transportation. And this is from the Washington State Target Zero Plan. And they've adopted this prevention through design from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and kind of applied it to a roadway or a transportation kind of scenario. And this is also similar to the safe system framework that has been produced by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE, where they've identified these 6 components, the best being to physically eliminate a hazard by separating vulnerable users in space. So for example, under higher speeds or higher traffic volumes, take bicyclists out of the roadway, put them in a separate pathway. So separating users. If we can't separate them in space, can we separate them in time, like at an intersection, where we provide an exclusive pedestrian phase, or increasing attentiveness, or reducing speed, managing collision angle, or managing impact distribution? And this philosophy is catching on in our roadway design guidance. The FHWA Bikeway Selection Guide has this principle that at higher speeds, higher volumes, to separate with a separate bike path. And for pedestrians, recent guidance that have come out on pedestrian guidance design has this notion that under higher volumes, higher speeds, the context may require physically separating pedestrians or at least having a traffic control device to stop the traffic, separation in time. So these principles are catching on. The pedestrian hybrid beacon is another example, and the leading pedestrian interval of this concept of separating users in time. And then kind of the next tier down is increasing awareness. And so there's many safety countermeasures that try to increase user attentiveness and awareness. And a good embodiment of these principles is captured in the protected intersection, or also known as the Dutch style of intersection. It tries to separate the vulnerable users, it tries to slow vehicular traffic, and it tries to increase awareness. So these concepts are now making it into our design and how we provide transportation facilities. And then that last element is post-crash care. It's the first responders, but it's also the crash investigation, the engineering component of it, traffic incident management, and also our judicial system. If a violation had occurred, if a driver was under the influence, certainly applying the court systems to remove, especially habitual offenders. That's all part of post-crash care. Being proactive. The planning process is key. I mentioned that Australia and New Zealand are about at least 10 years ahead of us on this journey of the safe system approach. They have identified the importance of planning in the safe system process. There is a wonderful publication that they have that shows the linkages. And if we can plan for a network that maybe reduces the need for vehicular traffic, if we have communities that are more walkable, more bikeable, where we have services that are transit oriented, just reducing the number of vehicle trips will have a potential safety benefit. So smart growth, smart planning is certainly a big part of planning to implement a safe system. And then lastly, redundancy, the 5 elements working together. I like to use the analogy of pieces of Swiss cheese, where the holes of the cheese represent weaknesses. And if we can strengthen the elements, we're basically reducing the size of the hole in the cheese. And assuming they're 5 separate slices cut from 5 different blocks, it's rare that the weaknesses would align. And so as we strengthen all 5 components, we work toward that safe system. Safe road users, it starts and ends there, but we know that we're humans, we will make mistakes. So there's weaknesses. We'll put some holes in that cheese. Our cars can help us. Our cars can help us from making a mistake in the first place. And then if we are in a crash, they can help us survive the collision, but that's not perfect either. So if we're in a crash, hopefully we were traveling at a safer speed, a lower speed that makes it survivable, but that's not always the case. Well, hopefully a safe roadway where we have a forgiving roadside, where there is not a hazard that gets hit. That can help make the consequence less severe. And then the last line of defense is the post-crash care. So these 5 components, they work together, they work collectively, because hopefully we want to put the user back into that pool of a safe road user. So these are really like 5 pieces of a puzzle that have to be connected. So what is the safe system approach? It's a different way of thinking, really. It's not about reducing crashes. It's really about eliminating fatal and severe injuries. And that relates to the 2 key principles of the approach. Kinetic energy management is really what it is. Speed is part of it, but it's really about angle of impact as well. The 4 E's of safety are in the 5 safe system elements. We share that responsibility. Being proactive instead of looking for high crash locations or hotspots, proactively implementing safety measures with a risk-based approach. And instead of trying to lay blame on the victims, on the users, it's really about strengthening all 5 elements and having that redundancy in the system so that we can only have safe mobility. So there's no single pathway to a safe system approach. The international experience shows that it's kind of a learning by doing, but by following those principles, we get closer and closer to that point where we are reducing the risk of fatal and severe outcome. So FHWA and other organizations, ITE, we are trying to develop more materials for practitioners to think about the safe system approach, apply it in decision making, and what it is, it's a lot of things. It's holistic, it's proactive, it anticipates human error, it's this moral imperative to get to zero. There's a kinetic energy management principle in there. It's all of these things, and it's really a way that we can work toward getting to our goal. So it's principles based. It requires strengthening all 5 elements. It's not an absolute, it's more of a continuum. And I hope this has been helpful, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to explain and give you some insights into the safe system approach. So
Mark,
I see some
thank you
hands
very
up
much.
and
That was
questions.
a terrific presentation. Do you have time to answer a few questions? I'm sure there are some that have surfaced. I see Chris Geisler, one of our members, has his hand up already, as does Brian Martinson. Let's go with Chris first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doctor, just again, appreciate the conversation. Honestly, it mirrors a lot of the conversations we have in the cybersecurity space where I work, where multiple layers of defense and not one thing can solve the problem. So the Swiss cheese model is very commonly used in my day life. The question I had for you really around this is, one of the pieces I didn't see you talk about was the mass of vehicles, and specifically electric vehicles for a given form factor are 25-30% heavier for the same form factor. So a sedan, a truck, or something like that. How is FHWA considering the design of roadways, considering that the future appears to be heavier vehicles for a given form factor, knowing that that is a key component of kinetic energy and the management, not only just the safety of a single vehicle, but also in an accident or crash?
Yeah, Christopher, you're absolutely right. That is a huge challenge. We seem to have our vehicle fleet getting not just heavier, but also the profile of the vehicle, and possibly being a factor in pedestrian safety as well. So we certainly are hopeful that as vehicle technologies continue to advance, things like forward warning collision systems, that can help. But you are absolutely right. It's one of the challenges that we have. So there's no quick and simple fix to that, but certainly speed management is an important element, especially when we are dealing with that larger mass. Because you're right, mass is part of that kinetic energy formula, but the velocity squared is another. It's exponential, and so yeah, mass is important. Larger vehicles, larger trucks, commercial vehicles as well, but all the more reason why the speed of those vehicles is important to consider as well. So yeah, thank you, Chris. Great question.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Member Martinson.
Thank you, Chair. I believe Commissioner Gattel had her hand up before I did. If she still has a question she wants to raise, I will let her take ahead of me.
All right, thank you
It's a
for
quick
that.
question, and it follows right along with what Member Geisler talked about. And it's about, I hear that all these EV vehicles are coming in and they're developing the SUVs now, but they're going to be heavier and with all the batteries and distributed very differently. And that there's some huge safety concerns about crashes with those vehicles.
Yes, it is almost like a double-edged sword, where on the one side, as the technologies get better and better, that there's gains to be made, but there's also the possible erosion by the fact that yes, the vehicles are getting heavier, profiles taller. So there are factors working against. All the more reason that the other elements, perhaps, of a safe system have to compensate for that. That's one thing about the approach, is that it acknowledges that we will never have perfection in any one of the elements. And so we hope that by achieving a higher level of performance in one element, it may help compensate for less in another. But yeah, there are challenges as well as the good news with vehicle safety.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Member Martinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doctor, for your presentation. I do appreciate the focus on a systems approach to these issues, which is an approach that has been used in my areas of research in patient safety and research integrity as well. I want to, this is sort of a related question to the question that was raised by Mr. Geisler and by Commissioner Gittell, but it goes a little bit, I think, further than that to say, in a systems approach to this, I think we have to recognize that not only are we having larger and heavier and geometrically more hostile SUVs and pickup trucks being designed, developed, and sold, aggressively sold by the manufacturers, but we've also got a federal system of federal laws that actually incentivize that through tax breaks for them. And they are also larger consumers of fuel if they're a gasoline engine car, certainly. And the battery functions for huge batteries in these large vehicles are going to pose challenges environmentally down the road as well. So we have a system that is systematically ramping up the kinetic energy on our roadways based on federal policy. And to what extent has the systems model that you're talking about here taken into account or attempted to assess the extent to which those federal policies are directly offsetting all the benefits in any of these other areas that have been endeavored? Because that offset, it seems to me, is one of the likeliest causal factors in the plateauing, and as you say now more recently, kicking up of the roadway crash fatalities and injuries. So has that been done? Has a systematic attempt to assess those offsets been undertaken?
Great comment, great question, Brian. And I'll have to be honest, I do not know. I'm in the engineering side of it. So in terms of the assessment of that larger vehicle fleet impact, there are activities and initiatives underway at NHTSA that look at vehicle safety. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to plead my ignorance on the specifics of that. But it is a great comment and very very enlightening. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Member Johnson.
I think actually Member Karwoski was before me.
Oh, okay. Commissioner, go ahead. I didn't see your hand up there.
Thank you. Mr. Doctor, if you could elaborate on the future of autonomous vehicles, I think in the trucking industry, perhaps transit and the bus system, I think are out leading it, but also not only the effect, the future effect on accidents and fatalities, but more immediate. Cars are equipped with guidance systems, and they're not all available, but things of you're getting too close to another vehicle, all these safety instruments within modern day cars, is that being computed into your safety statistics moving forward?
Yes, sir. Great question. So yeah, the advancements in connected and automated vehicles are just astonishing to me. The advancements far exceeded the timeline that I would have envisioned years ago. So my opinions are very reliable. I think the technology is incredible. The advancements have been spectacular. We can only hope for continued success. Now, what sectors, and you mentioned trucking, you mentioned buses, and we're seeing different applications in various areas for connected and automated vehicles. The future, what will actually happen, it's speculation, but we are certainly trying our best to prepare, to design and accommodate this rapidly emerging and successful implementation. So yeah, it's hard to keep up sometimes, or hard to try to outguess what may happen.
Thank you.
Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess a line of question, I guess, is probably on heavier vehicles in general. Like that's outside the purview of anything the Transportation Advisory Board here has any contact with. It's a federal policy. But for a lot of what we're talking about, it's on the road design and the safety that we put an emphasis on. And so I guess the question I have behind that is, are there any, either now or potentially coming up in the near future, recommendations on changes to what is considered a safe road design based upon heavier vehicles that is something we should be incorporating into our evaluation for our regional solicitation for allocation of federal funds?
Excellent question. So the Federal Highway Administration and many transportation agencies promote a context sensitive or context appropriate design philosophy. So the designs that we use for interstates or industrial areas may be different from a urban setting with a lot of bicyclists or pedestrians. So yeah, we are evolving toward this greater consideration of context and context zones for roadway design. We are shifting from less reliance on a functional classification to more of a classification based upon a road type and its context. So the folks that develop our roadway design guidance and criteria are evolving into this area of having a finer array of roadway types and the context of that types. The basic design dimensions are still very flexible and adaptable, but with trying to make the compromises more toward aligning with the context that the roadway is in. So yes, that is a shift that is occurring in the roadway design community.
Mayor Winchell?
Yeah, I guess as I sit and listen to this, I really hadn't thought about the weight factor, even though I'm pretty aware that there is a big significant difference. And we're talking about designing of safe roads. Has there been any, and I've not ridden in a electric car or any of that yet at this point, but I hear about how fast they are in the first place. But is there education given to these drivers as they get an electric car about the difference in the mass weight, how it's in a different location than current cars? And I don't know, is there a better braking system in them if these vehicles are heavier and things like that? We talk about road safety, but is there anything been put into driver safety to understand when they purchase electric car about how much different it is than a standard vehicle of today?
That is an excellent point. Honestly, I do not know about how much attention is given to at the consumer level when they buy let's say, an electric vehicle or a heavier vehicle. My hunch is that there probably is not, but it's certainly very interesting. And I would say that driver awareness and education as a whole, regardless of what type of vehicle we drive, in many areas, we're seeing less emphasis on driver education, and that's not good. And so some areas, as part of what they would choose as an emphasis area to improve safety, may include that heavier piece on trying to raise that awareness and education, because you're right, there is that added responsibility. If we are going to choose to drive a heavier vehicle, a faster vehicle, and that's a key part of it, and strengthening that safe road user element would be part of that. Excellent point. Thank you.
Mr. Doctor, you had some countries that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, and held them up as sort of the benchmark, or I think the higher gold standard for safe systems. I'm wondering, with respect to Sweden, what are the most effective strategies you've seen employed there that reduce serious injuries or fatalities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists?
Yeah, I think one of the key lessons that we can learn from countries like Sweden and the Netherlands is this concept of having a road look to a driver, have it look like a road that explains itself in terms of what is an appropriate speed. And I think that's been one of the challenges that we have in the United States, that in most areas where we typically see a roadway safety problem is in the suburban arterial, where we have higher speeds, higher volumes, and a mix of pedestrians and bicyclists. And you know, sometimes those arterials, whether they're 4-lane, 6-lane, and typically driveways with you know, maybe not so good access management. Those are typically where agencies are seeing the greatest safety challenges, and those are roads that you don't see very many of in other in those European countries, especially the Scandinavian countries. Now, they didn't achieve that overnight. It took them decades to kind of transform their system. Many people think of the Netherlands as that great bicycle-friendly country, and they do have so many bicyclists, but that wasn't always the case. Back in the 1970s, a lot of their roads looked a lot like some of the vehicle-centric roads that we may see here. But that transformation and that goal of making roads look appropriate for the context that they're in, I think that's a key lesson that we can take away from countries like Sweden and the Netherlands. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time.
For all of us that do our work as part of government, cities, counties, the state, I think if you have some examples of what a road needs to look like in order to explain itself, to make sure that we maximize the protections for those people moving around in a non-motorized way, we'd love to see those ideas.
Yes, sir. And one thing I did not mention is the linkage between the safe system approach and complete streets. And that's another area where you've probably heard a lot of activity and awareness, and it's certainly something the Federal Highway Administration is promoting. So complete streets, there's streets that are safe for all users. And when people ask the question, well, what would a safe system road look like? Well, it would look like a complete street, a road that is safe for all users. So when we think about, well, what is a good design practice, that's really where we have parallels to the activity of trying to advance the concept of complete streets that are designed safely for everyone.
All right, good. Well, I want to thank you for being with us today. We've got some other items we've got to cover from an informational standpoint, and I've already pushed folks to the limit of the time, but it was a really helpful and enjoyable conversation with you today.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, and then the next matter we have from an informational standpoint is TMO and TDM project updates. I think Teresa Kane's going to try to take us through those quickly.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for the opportunity to talk about TDM activity through the CMAQ grant program. My name is Teresa Kane. I'm a manager at Commuter Programs, which is housed at Metro Transit, where we not only do our own TDM activity, but we also work with our partners and our funded partners, so our funded programs that come through the regional solicitation. Next slide, I guess. So the unofficial slogan of our work is changing minds about changing modes. And basically what we do is long-term public outreach and education And that under the CMAQ grant is considered something that can be funded indefinitely. In other words, lots of the programs have time limitations, 3 years or 2 years or whatever, but outreach and education to support other modes can be funded indefinitely. Next. So I want to start with the employer and institutional outreach. I apologize if my computer's making noise. So start with the employer and institutional outreach. That is Metro Transit and the TMOs and other agencies, but particularly that do outreach to employers and institutions on a regular basis. So a TDM professional role in one of these organizations, Metro Transit included, provides a single point of contact for people for employers and institutions. So they have a one-to-one relationship working through the issues. They get a customized plan, including all feasible modes, and that's prepared by the TDM professional. They partner with stakeholders to implement priorities, if that's Metro Transit or Nice Ride or whatever suits the unique situation. Plan activities and supportive events to ensure sustained behavior change. That is where we go to an employer or an institution and walk them through how they're going to make this change, educate people about it, and then actually talk to the individuals about how they can use their new mode. And then we prepare an analysis of results. In other words, we have perhaps, for example, sold a Metro Pass product to an employer, and we would track that through to see how we're doing on rides, et cetera. And then we maintain a ongoing contact with the employer institution to make sure that they continue to meet their needs, and if there's anything we can update them, update in their program. One of the recent examples of a program that we have instituted, this was a pilot program with Augsburg College, where we recognized that College Pass was underused at Augsburg College, and we engaged them about the low uptake and what kinds of things could happen to prevent or to increase usage of transit to the location. So our staff people here at Metro Transit did an analysis to provide insight, and then developing what's called now the Universal Pass, where instead of students paying out of pocket each semester and only some students getting the pass, everybody at the school is afforded a pass. And in this case, they chose to charge themselves in their own student fees to pay for the passes. So it was a real attractive program to Augsburg College. So in that pilot, we were able to gain 800 new riders, regular riders. Everybody had the pass, and this is above the riders that they had, at about $12.50 per participant. In other words, we spent $10,000 on staff, outreach events, meetings, preparation. That amounts to about $12.50 per participant for this particular pilot. We have now expanded Universal Pass as an official product, and we are now in 4 more schools. So the good news is, we piloted it, we were able to demonstrate it, and now other people think that that's a good idea as well. Next slide. Okay, so here's the basic structure of employer and institutional outreach. Metro Transit has 2 staff people that provide outreach in service areas that are not covered by a TMO or other partners. So the TMOs have specific areas that they operate in that are high density with employers or schools. That's the 494 TMO, Move Minnesota TMO, which does the entire city of St. Paul. Move Minneapolis TMO is what we call the expanded downtown core. So they're in the North Loop, et cetera. Mostly, the commuters that come into the downtown. And then Anoka County has the whole county where they work with employers and in some cases individuals, because they're commuting into downtown Minneapolis and they may not be aware of their options, so they often partner with Move Minneapolis. Other partners that provide similar outreach: Carver County, Dakota County, Washington County, MVTA, Southwest Metro, Scott County, just to name a few. So there are a lot of folks that do this work, and we're happy to engage with all of them to provide the best service that we can. Next slide. And then the regional solicitation provides us with other TDM initiatives that are approved through that process. And just to give you a couple of examples, and first I want to say that oftentimes when they get their funding, there's a bit of a delay for them to get it, and then their projects can run 2 or 3 years. So it's quite a bit of delay to get the results. But the U of M smartphone-based interventions, they created a smartphone app and used it to encourage people to carpool or use transit passes to get to the University of Minnesota based on their study. So initially they had estimated 3,000 participants. They actually ended up only getting 300 participants, and that was partly due to some changed circumstances that were unavoidable. But the valuable information then was used to do the now Flex Pass program. So they used the information from that program to develop the Flex Pass program, which is now occurring in downtown Minneapolis, where they're offering both a parking pass and a transit pass in one to people so they can change up the way that they commute. And then bicycle connectors, providing underserved communities with access to bikes. They train them if they have to teach them how to ride, they do. They train them how to maintain, how to take them apart and rebuild them if necessary. They have bike buddies that might lead trips to make people feel more comfortable using bikes as transportation. The initial estimates, this was 2019, the initial estimate was 723 participants. They actually ended up getting about 500 participants. And again, there were mitigating circumstances. This is only during the bike season. And in 2020, the bike season and training people in person was not as much of a thing. But everybody who has learned comes back to the place to maintain their bikes, and they are still biking based on surveys that they did. So again, another successful program that has changed modes for people. Next slide. So the other thing that we do at Metro Transit and sometimes at other area partners is to support other kinds of activities besides outreach that would encourage people to use alternatives to driving alone. In this case, we had a partnership with the CAP board around developing the Sears site in the Capitol Complex area. And I provided a link there. I don't think there's a final report on there yet, but we did an analysis and then offered recommendations for when they are going through the selection process for a new building to be located there. And that's part of the selection process that will happen when they're ready to develop that area. We also provide legislatively mandated ride matching software to help individuals form carpools and van pools, and we promote van pooling. Software and access to the Guaranteed Ride Home program that is kind of a plan B for people who use alternatives. And then, you know, someone is sick and they have to get home early or whatever, there's a structured program for that. Software that tracks activities, contacts, and statistics to streamline activity tracking. We're currently working on that and we're training our partners how to use it. And then also we provide customizable marketing materials that we share with all the TDM partners in the area. Next slide. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. There's a lot going on. This is just a quick synopsis of the kind of stuff. If anyone is interested in hearing about projects in more detail, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, Teresa, thank you so much. There is indeed a lot going on with the TMOs and the TDM activities. So thanks for that update. Anybody have any quick questions? Otherwise, I want to get to Joe here as well and have him give us a quick development schedule update. Any questions?
Sure. I have a very quick question for for the presenter, Teresa. Thank you so much for
Go
the
ahead, Member
presentation.
Martinson, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So among the TMOs that I saw you were engaged with, what I didn't see in the slides was the number of large employers that we have around the Twin Cities. I have over a number of years attempted to get Health Partners, for instance, which has over 25,000 employees, engaged in trying to manage their commuter fleet more effectively, to absolutely no avail. I've gotten zero uptake in the organization, but I'm thinking that Met Council probably has a little bit more leverage than I do as an employee. And so I'm wondering, there's other large employers too, like the 3Ms of the world and the et cetera. So are they also being engaged on their commuter fleets is the real question here.
Yes. So just can you clarify what you mean by commuter fleet?
I mean that 95 or higher % of the employees that are going into these workplaces are driving single occupancy motor vehicles, not
Okay. I
carpooling.
just wanted to make sure we're not talking about fleets of cars or anything like that. Yeah, so for example, Health Partners is in the 494 TMO area, and 494 works with the headquarters, and then in turn also works with the partners across the region as part of a kind of sharing of services that we do by coordinating all of our efforts. So they have been working with them. There was a fair amount of progress made. That's one of the reasons why we're developing this database where we track employers and what's going on. And so if there is a large employer that we're not engaged with, then that goes on our list to make sure that we reach out to them. One thing I will say is if you have any leverage with people at the top of the organization, it's helpful to, get a foot in the door that way. Sometimes we work with HR or we work with facilities and they don't always have the final say on what kinds of products. So if you have any ins and you want to share them, feel free to reach out to me and I'll work with Melissa to make sure that we knock on their door again. Great.
All right. Thanks, Teresa. Anyone else? All right. Thanks for being with us. I'm going to go to Joe real quick, Joe Barbeau, and give us a TIP development schedule update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's the very last item on your agenda. And what you see in that item is the very same TIP amendment schedule, or I'm sorry, TIP adoption schedule that we had last year. So there's really not a lot to report on. I'll remind you that the TIP will be released for public comment on May 18th at your next meeting. The public comment period will end on July 5th. It's a 45-day public comment period. And then you would see the final TIP in August, which has always been the case. You are now looking at the public comment period about a month earlier than you used to, and that is related in large part to the fact that the last couple of years we've gotten 210 public comments or so. So that's all I'll have, but if people have questions about the TIP process, this schedule or the TIP in general, you can ask them now or find me later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Anybody have any quick questions on Joe's informational item? He's got that chart set out in the materials. All right, folks. And then I just want to go back quickly to Commissioner Luck. I don't know if he's still with us or not, and Member Barber, and I think just encourage them to, it sounds like we get a little bit of frayed trust there. I'd like to have you rebuild that trust. We need to all be working together in the region here when we face these difficult situations. We need to figure out a way to be finding common ground and get the problem solved and avoid the finger pointing. So unless there's anything else there on that issue, I think we'll, and does anybody else have any items they want to cover? I forgot to ask that. Okay, thanks for your patience today, folks. Hey, George Schember, would you tell everybody what you're up to? Not everybody knows.
Sure. So I turned my wife and I turned 60 this summer. And so we are going to bike basically from Oregon to Virginia, self-supported, on our own trail. We're going to take the Trans-America route for a good portion, but also across the Gap Trail into Pennsylvania and down into Washington, D.C. So that's a bucket list item for us, and we've been training for it all winter. It's not been easy, but we're ready to go. We kick off May